Hey folks, walk with me. Well, I know I've done a lot of videos recently about money and wealth and how it impacts happiness, but that's because I really think it's sort of a sickness that we have in our current society, and that there's a lot of challenges that come with capitalism that we should at least be able to talk about and not just sweep under the rug and say, either this one system works super well for you or it doesn't, and if it doesn't, too bad. But one thing that I came across the other day that had me go, oh, this is interesting, is a quote from the Stoic Epictetus, who said, I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but basically he said, wealth is not possessing great things. The key to wealth is to having few wants. And we'll circle back to the quote itself, but I'll actually mention why this stood out to me, because I had come across this quote before, but as you can tell, as I'm not remembering it perfect right now, I didn't remember it perfectly, but I remembered sort of, coming across the concept. But the reason that it stood out to me this time is because of sort of the persona or the group of people who are sort of very keyed into and are very keen on Stoics and Stoicism, right? It got very, I assume in present day, Ryan Holiday did the heavy lifting as it pertains to really making Stoics and Stoicism very, very popular. And I'm just talking about super modern day. I know he was on Rogan. He has, I don't know if he has his own podcast, but he certainly has his own content channel or channels and has interfaced with a lot of high profile people and talked about Stoicism and the wisdom of the Stoics. So if you think of sort of that group of people, right? Like the Rogan sphere and all of those sort of Rogan comics and whatnot, and the Jackos and those. I don't know if he's been on Jackos, but in any case, my point is, it's interesting that Epictetus had that view of capitalism, and a lot of those people, not of capitalism, but of wealth and how to sort of put a framework around wealth. And a lot of the people who will sort of hold up Stoicism as being this alpha male or Sigma, which is something I just came across since I am old. But a lot of those folks will also spout off the whole oh, what are you saying? You'll own nothing and you'll be happy, right? That whatever quote they attribute that to, the relatively recent one that had everyone freaking out that they were going to be forced to eat bugs and have no gas stoves and have no windows in their house and I don't know, live in communes only. I don't know, whatever wild sort of thing that Alex Jones has been shouting about for 30 years that still hasn't come true. There's certainly a Venn diagram that exists that elucidates the strong crossover between that alpha male sort of highly achieving I was going to say self-importance, but I mean self-improvement above all kind of mindset, right? The Andrew Huberman kind of optimize everything mindset. There's a strong crossover there in the Venn diagram of those people with that mindset that ties into this success through money. You think of the Andrew Tates of the world, and that's your next car or your next private jet or whatever it is your proof of wealth and success and worthiness, which says a lot about those people, but that's another video. The crossover in the crowd between that and also that same crowd that thinks Stoics and Stoicism are in line with this alpha male and And yet, you have some sort of sobering framework for considerations around success and wealth and how to really gain perspective on how to attain that in life from Stoics, or at least from Epictetus. And so this idea of not possessing great things, right? Or not having great possessions, your McLaren, or I don't know anything about cars, or your Porsche 911 or Ferrari. Am I really proving my point here that I don't know much about cars? Or your yacht, right? Or your tour bus, your private jet. It's not in the possession of those things, right? Or your super fancy watch. I feel like that's become such a thing also. But it is in that concept that freaks everyone out in Western capitalist society. The freak out of, oh my God, someone is saying you should lower your threshold for the things that you want, right? Because if you do that, you know, the scariest thing to whoever is sort of making the billions and billions as an individual at the top is for people to step off of the hedonic treadmill and find a way to say, I'm not just going to incessantly tell myself that the next great thing that I can buy, the next huge salary jump that I can make, the next title that I can attain is going to make me feel something worthy, better than, superior to, or just wealthy, right? If you can step off of that and say, I'm going to go a different direction. I can still work hard. I can still love what I do. I can still buy a private jet if I want. But my sort of contextualization around why I'm doing what I'm doing isn't going to be for those things, because I actually want very little. And in the wanting of very little, it doesn't have to impact your ability to strive. There's also this sickness around, if you aren't constantly in fear of ending up sleeping on the street, or going without food, or not being able to put a roof over your kid's head, if you're not constantly in that sort of mode of fear, that you won't be incentivized. There will be no impulse that you have to try hard, to do better, to stay very much on the treadmill. And no matter what you attain, get over it very quickly and say, well, this was cool, this was good, but it's not great. That next thing, and you name that next thing, is what will make it great. And then once you get that next great thing, you have that same conversation with yourself again. And so, I don't know, I have a hard time with the folks who freak out every time that they hear, you might want to consider living with less. Not feeling like you have to buy and possess every freaking thing in the world. And then, just a small side note here, I think there's also a strong tie in here to people who then complain that everything is offshored and everything's made in China and everything is planned obsolescence and everything breaks much sooner than it should. Yes, it's because it has to be made that cheaply, because people who have no business affording it, and you can look at the credit card debt here in the US, they insist that they have to fill their house and their pockets and their purses and their cars with all of this stuff that I would really sit down and question if they actually need it, much less that they actually want it for some purpose other than to just be fully bought into this concept of success through attainment of material possessions and status and power, and that the number in your bank account is a reflection of your capitalistic worthiness as a citizen of the US. All right. I probably got very convoluted there, but the boil down to me is it was interesting to see the crossover between the alpha males who seem to want to, pedestalize material wealth and the goal of material wealth as one of the highest marks of a person, and that they will also be super tied into this idea that Stoicism makes you strong and stoic and unyielding. But if you look at what at least Epictetus said about the first part, the wealth part, is very much not in line with their concept, the modern day concept of kill yourself to attain everything and anything all the time, because otherwise you're being a bad capitalist, a bad citizen of the capitalistic society. All right, folks, we walked a little over 11 minutes. So if you walked, cool beans. I hope you're enjoying at least the fall scenery here. It's getting pretty, though this is very evergreen here, but we'll get some leaf changing colors in some videos soon enough. And no matter what, if you watched it this far, I certainly appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.